Pathetic. That's the last word he ever spoke to her. His wife, Lorraine. In the courtroom he laughed while his lawyer took her home, her money, and her future. He saw a broken woman, a ghost. He walked away with his mistress, absolutely convinced he had won. He had no idea. He was the pawn. Her silence wasn't weakness, it was a contract. Her humiliation was a mask, and underneath that mask was a $200 million secret. This is the story of how the woman he threw away came back to buy everything he ever loved. The fluorescent lights of courtroom 3B hummed a sick, buzzing dirge. They flickered, just slightly, casting a sallow, unforgiving light on Lorraine Hunt's hands, which she had folded so tightly in her lap that her knuckles were the color of old bone. Opposite her, at the defendant's table, her husband, her ex-husband, as of 3 minutes from now, Ashton Wilde, radiated warmth. It was, Lorraine thought, his most infuriating superpower. Even in this sterile box of cheap wood veneer and stale coffee, Ashton looked like he had just stepped out of a catalogue for men who summer in the Hamptons. His suit was a deep, offensive charcoal, tailored so perfectly it seemed less a garment and more an extension of his own ambition. His hair, a little long on top, was artfully tousled. He wasn't looking at her. He was leaning toward his lawyer, a man with a jaw so square it looked painful, and chuckling at something. The sound, low and rich, scraped against Lorraine's nerve endings. Then Ashton picked up his pen, a heavy, silver Mont Blanc she had given him for their 5th anniversary. He began to click it. Click, click, click. A steady, percussive rhythm that said, "I am bored. I am done. Let's get this over with." "Ms. Hunt?" Lorraine jumped. The judge, a woman named O'Malley with a face like a tired bloodhound, was peering at her over her glasses. "Your counsel has stated you agree to the proposed settlement. A full waiver of future alimony in exchange for the—" She paused, flipping a page. "2010 Honda Civic, the contents of the guest bedroom, and a one-time payment of $20,000. Is that correct?" Lorraine's lawyer, a young, earnest man named David, who she'd found in a strip mall and was paying with the last of her emergency savings, gave her an encouraging nod. Lorraine swallowed. Her throat felt like it was full of sand. She looked at Ashton. He had stopped clicking the pen. He was watching her now, a small, perfectly cruel smile playing on his lips. It was his "you're being hysterical" smile, the one he used when she cried about his late nights, or when she'd found the receipts from hotels she'd never been to. He was daring her to speak, to fight, to make a scene. He knew she wouldn't. He had spent the last 8 years systematically dismantling the part of her that fought back. "Ms. Hunt," the judge repeated, her patience visibly fraying. Click, click, click. The sound from Ashton's table was the only sound in the room, a mocking countdown. "Yes," Lorraine whispered. Her voice was a dry rasp, a stranger's voice. "Yes, Your Honor, I agree." "Speak up, child," the judge sighed. Lorraine sat taller, pulling on a thread of dignity she didn't know she had left. She looked directly at Judge O'Malley. "Yes, Your Honor, I agree to the terms." "Very well." The gavel cracked, a sound as final as a closing coffin lid. "The dissolution is granted." Ashton Wilde snapped his briefcase shut. It was buttery soft Italian leather. She'd bought that for him too. He stood, buttoned his jacket, and gave his lawyer a hearty slap on the back. He had not looked at Lorraine, not once, since she'd spoken. Lorraine sat frozen, the hum of the lights now a deafening roar in her ears. David, her lawyer, patted her hand. "It's for the best, Lorraine. A clean break. You can start over now." Start over. With what? She was 34 years old, had an associate's degree in art history, and a resume gap of 8 years titled homemaker, a word that felt like a joke. She gathered her pilled wool coat, a coat Ashton had always hated. It makes you look frumpy, law. And walked out of the courtroom alone. He was waiting for her in the hallway. No, not for her. He was waiting for the elevator, checking his phone. But standing next to him, so close they were almost touching, was Rosalind Crane. Rosalind. The name tasted like ash. Rosalind was everything Lorraine was not. She was the VP of marketing at Ashton's firm. She was tall, with hair the color of a raven's wing and a laugh that could cut glass. She was wearing a blood-red sheath dress under a crisp black trench coat. She saw Lorraine, and her eyes, dark and assessing, flicked over Lorraine's cheap coat and worn-out flats. A tiny, pitying smile touched her red-painted lips. Ashton finally looked up from his phone, his face bright with a genuine smile that Lorraine hadn't seen directed at her in years. "Ah, Rosalind. Ready for lunch?" "Always, Ash," she purred. Then, and only then, did Ashton turn his gaze to Lorraine. He looked her up and down, the smile fading, replaced by that familiar, patronizing contempt. The elevator doors dinged open. "Well, Law," he said, gesturing to her coat, her pale face, the entire pathetic picture she presented. "You finally got what you wanted. You're free." He stepped into the elevator beside Rosalind, his hand finding the small of her back. Just before the doors slid shut, he added one last thing, a final twist of the knife. "You know," he said, his voice laced with a performer's pity, "I almost would have respected you more if you'd fought, cried, something. But this silence," he chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "It was pathetic. Goodbye, Lorraine." The doors closed, sealing her in the hallway with the echo of his laughter. Lorraine Hunt stood there for a full minute, the smell of Rosalind's expensive perfume, something sharp, like sandalwood and victory, clinging to the air. She didn't cry. She did not scream. She reached into her pocket and closed her hand around a smooth, cool piece of jade, a small pendant. She walked past the bank of elevators, found the stairs, and began the long walk down to the street. Ashton was wrong. Her silence wasn't pathetic. It wasn't weakness. It was a contractual obligation. It was the hardest, most painful, and most lucrative performance of her entire life. She had held her tongue. She had not contested the divorce. She had not fought for the house, or the stocks, or the alimony she was rightfully owed. She had agreed to everything. She reached the bottom stair and pushed open the heavy door, stepping out into the frigid Boston air. She looked at her watch. 11:30 a.m. In 6 weeks, on her 35th birthday, her silence would officially be over. And thanks to a reclusive, eccentric great-aunt she'd only met twice, that silence would be worth $200 million. She pulled her pilled wool coat tighter. It was, after all, the only one she had. For now, the apartment on Beacon Street was gone. The gleaming hardwood floors, the sub-zero fridge, the view of the public garden in the snow, all gone. Lorraine's new home was a third-floor walk-up in Somerville, in a building that smelled of old garlic and wet wool. Her apartment, 3C, was a studio in the most generous sense. It consisted of one room, oatmeal-colored walls, and a radiator that hissed like a cornered snake. Her bed was a mattress on the floor. Her kitchen table was a cardboard box. This was what $20,000, minus David's legal fees and the deposit on the apartment, looked like. It was, Lorraine decided, the most honest place she'd ever lived. She was unpacking her single box of guest room items, old towels, a lamp, a copy of Jane Eyre, when her phone, a prepaid burner, buzzed. It was a text from a number she had saved under the name SL. "It's done." Lorraine sat on the edge of her mattress. She typed back one word: "Yes." A moment later, the phone rang. She answered. "Ms. Hunt? Spencer Layton?" The voice was as crisp as a new dollar bill, calm, professional, and utterly devoid of emotion. "Mr. Layton," she said, her own voice sounding small in the empty room. "The dissolution is final. You are, in the eyes of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, no longer Lorraine Wilde?" "Yes. The judge signed it an hour ago." There was a pause on the line. She heard the faint shuffle of papers. Spencer Layton was not a man who engaged in small talk. He was the senior partner at Layton & Associates, the most prestigious estate law firm in Boston. He was the executor of the Elara Crane Trust. He was, for the last 4 months, the only person on earth who knew her secret. "And Mr. Wilde?" Spencer asked. "The terms were satisfactory to him." "He was," Lorraine said, a bitter smile touching her lips. "Delighted. He thought my silence was pathetic." "His opinion of you is irrelevant," Layton said dismissively. "What matters is that you have honored the stipulation. No contest, no claim on his assets, no communication of your future standing. You have, by all legal definitions, severed the attachment." "Yes," Lorraine said, the word heavy. "I have." She remembered that first meeting in Spencer Layton's office, a place of such profound, old-world wealth that she had felt like an imposter. It was 4 months ago. Ashton had just asked for the divorce, telling her he and Rosalind were in love, and he deserved to be happy. Lorraine had been weeping in the guest room for a week when the letter arrived. Thick cream-colored cardstock, embossed with the Layton & Associates crest. They were requesting an urgent meeting regarding the estate of her great-aunt, Elara Crane. Lorraine had only met Elara twice. Once at a family funeral when Lorraine was 10. Elara had worn a hat with a veil and smelled of violets and dust. The second time was at Lorraine's wedding. Elara, already in her 80s, had shown up uninvited, observed the lavish ceremony Ashton's parents had paid for, and given them one gift, the small jade pendant. She had pressed it into Lorraine's hand. "This is for luck," Elara had whispered, her eyes sharp and bright, scanning the crowd. "But I see you're going to need more than luck with that one. He smells of ambition. It's a rot." Lorraine had been horrified and had quickly hidden the peasant jewelry, as Ashton later called it. Now, sitting in Spencer Layton's vast mahogany-paneled office, she learned the truth. Elara Crane, the crazy old recluse of the powerful, wealthy Crane family, had been one of the shrewdest investors of the 20th century, and she had left her entire fortune, a staggering $200 million, to one person. Not to the main branch of the family, the branch that produced grasping, social-climbing wannabes like Rosalind Crane, a distant, disdained cousin as it turned to be. No, Elara had left it all to Lorraine. There was just one catch. Elara, a woman who'd been married and divorced 4 times, despised attachments. "It's what she called the Elara stipulation," Spencer Layton had explained, his face impassive. "You will inherit the principal sum of the trust on your 35th birthday. However, the inheritance is conditional. From the date of my reading, this will to you. Until your birthday, you must be, quote, wholly and completely free of all material and emotional entanglements that seek to claim rather than cherish." He'd paused. "In short, Ms. Hunt, my client was very clear. If you are married when you turn 35, you get nothing. If you inform your husband of the inheritance in an attempt to save your marriage, you get nothing. If you use the promise of the money as a weapon in a divorce proceeding, you get nothing. The trust dissolves, and the funds are redirected to the New England home for wayward cats. Lorraine had stared at him. He just asked me for a divorce. Yes, Spencer had said, a flicker of something, interest, pity in his grey eyes, a stroke of incredible or perhaps tragic timing. Ilara's will states you must be free. Your husband is offering you that freedom. The stipulation demands you take it, and you must take it on his terms. His terms? He must believe he is the one with the power, Leighton said. He must believe he is discarding you. You cannot fight him. You cannot claim assets. You must walk away with nothing but what he allows you to have. You must, in essence, become nothing to him. Can you do that, Miss Hunt? Can you be nothing for 6 months to gain everything? Now, sitting on her mattress in the dusty, cold apartment, Lorraine knew the answer. She had done it. 6 weeks, Miss Hunt, Spencer said, pulling her back to the present. 6 weeks until your birthday. The private security team monitoring your ex-husband and Miss. Crane reports they are celebrating at Vetro. You are, for now, forgotten. Good, Lorraine said. My advice, he continued, is to remain invisible. Get a part-time job if you must. Something simple. Pay in cash. Do not use your credit cards. Do not contact any of your old friends. They are his friends now. You are a ghost. Ghosts don't have dinner parties. I understand. Good. The trust will wire you a small, untraceable stipend for living expenses. $500 a week. It will be deposited in a new account under your maiden name. Use it sparingly. We are in the final stretch. Do not falter. I won't, she said, her voice stronger now. Very well. Happy Thanksgiving, Miss Hunt. He hung up. Lorraine stared at the phone. He hadn't just given her an order. He'd given her a strategy. He was the general, and she was the soldier, deep behind enemy lines. The enemy wasn't just Ashton. It was her own past, her own weakness, her own desire to scream at the injustice of it all. She put the phone down and stood up. The room was cold. She went to the window, which looked out onto a brick wall. 6 weeks. She could do this. She had given up her home, her friends, her name, and her pride. 6 weeks was nothing. She picked up Jane Eyre from the box. She opened the cover. Tucked inside was the small jade pendant Ilara had given her. She put it on. The stone was cool against her skin. She thought of Ashton, laughing at her pathetic silence. Let him laugh, she thought, the first spark of real, cold anger starting to glow in her chest. Let him laugh all the way to the bank. He has no idea I'm the one who owns it. Vetro was all glass and steel, a glittering jewel box perched on the 52nd floor, overlooking a Boston skyline that seemed to kneel before it. It was, as Rosalind Crane had declared, the only place to celebrate. To us? Rosalind said, raising her champagne flute. The diamond on her left hand, the one Ashton had given her the moment his divorce was finalized, was vulgar in its size, and she adored it. To us? Ashton echoed, clinking her glass. He leaned in and kissed her, a long, proprietary kiss that was as much for the watching room as it was for her. And to the end of, well, everything. Don't be morose, Ash, Rosalind purred, taking a sip. It's not an end. It's a beginning. The real beginning. Ashton settled back into the buttery leather banquette. He was, if he was honest, buzzing. Not from the champagne, but from the sheer, unadulterated relief. The last 6 months had been a slog. Lorraine, in her depression, had become dense, a walking fog of misery. It was like trying to swim through wet wool. "You were right," he said, spearing a piece of tuna tartar. "Your strategy was flawless." Rosalind arched a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. "I'm in marketing, darling. Strategy is what I do. The Band-Aid approach. Quick, clean, and brutal. If you dragged it out, she would have gotten ideas. Lawyers, spousal support, the house." "I still can't believe she didn't fight," Ashton mused, shaking his head. "Not for anything. I mean, my God, the silence. I was sitting there today, clicking my pen, just waiting for her to burst into tears or start screaming. Nothing. She just sat there, like a lump." "What did you expect?" Rosalind said, applying a fresh coat of crimson lipstick. "She's a weak woman, Ashton. That's why you were so miserable. You were tied to a rowboat while you were trying to pilot a yacht. You need someone who can match your speed." "You," he said, grasping her hand. "You're my yacht." "Don't be trite," she said, but she squeezed his hand back. Rosalind Crane was not a weak woman. She, unlike Ashton, had not been born into comfort. She was a Crane, yes, but she was from the Scranton Cranes, the poor, embarrassing branch of the family that the Boston Cranes tried to forget. Her entire life had been a series of calculated, ruthless moves to claw her way out of mediocrity and into a world she felt she deserved. Ashton Wilde, with his prepackaged, old money-adjacent firm and his desperate need for a trophy wife who was also a killer in the boardroom, was just the latest, and most successful, of those moves. She had seen Lorraine as a mild, irritating obstacle, a piece of old furniture that needed to be thrown out. "She'll be fine," Ashton said, more to himself than to her. "The 20 grand will tide her over until she, I don't know, goes back to her parents in Ohio." "She won't," Rosalind said, her voice flat. "She'll waste it on self-help books and therapy, and in 6 months she'll be working at a Starbucks. It's the natural order of things, Ash. The strong survive. We're the strong." "I hate that pilled wool coat she wears," Ashton said, with a sudden, sharp clarity. "I've hated it for 5 years." "You'll never have to see it again," Rosalind said. She signaled the waiter. "Another bottle. The Dom." As she was looking for the waiter, her eyes snagged on a man at the bar. He was older, impeccably dressed in a Savile Row suit, and was nursing a single scotch. He was also, she realized, watching them. No, not them. He was watching her. She didn't recognize him, but she recognized his type. Old Boston money. The kind of man who sat on boards and had wings of hospitals named after him. He looked away, but not before his eyes, cold and grey, assessed her with something that looked chillingly like amusement. "Who's that?" Ashton asked, following her gaze. "Nobody," Rosalind said, turning back. "Just some old Brahmin fossil." But the man's gaze had unsettled her. It had reminded her, in a way she despised, of her great-aunt. The crazy one. Ilara. Rosalind had a faint, bitter memory of being dragged to some family function as a child, and this terrifying old woman, dripping in jewels, had looked at her with the same assessing, amused stare. "This one's a climber," Ilara had said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "All talon, no heart. She'll go far or she'll fall hard." Rosalind had hated her ever since. "Did you hear?" she said, changing the subject. "That old bat Ilara Crane finally died?" Ashton shrugged. "The name sounds familiar. One of your—" "Distant," Rosalind said quickly. "Very distant. A recluse. Apparently she was worth a fortune. The Boston Cranes were all sharpening their knives, but the rumor is she left it all to a cat sanctuary or something, just to spite them. Serves them right." "A fortune, eh?" Ashton said, suddenly interested. "Are we talking—" Millions, darling, hundreds of millions. Rosalind leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. But it's gone. Poof, to a bunch of tabby cats. Can you imagine? A tragedy, Ashton said, though his eyes were gleaming. He loved talking about money. The real tragedy, Rosalind said, is that it wasn't me. I'm the only crane in this generation with the sense to do anything with that kind of money. Well, Ashton said, draining his glass and signalling for the check. You've got me. We'll make our own fortune. Yes, Rosalind said, smiling. We will. As they left, passing the bar, the old man in the Savile Row suit was gone. But on the bar top, left next to his empty glass, was a business card. Rosalind, ever the opportunist, glanced at it as she passed. Leighton and Associates, estate law. A shiver, cold and sharp, ran down her spine. She dismissed it. Probably just a coincidence. She looped her arm through Ashton's. Let's go home, darling, she said, her voice a low, victorious purr. I believe we have a king-sized bed that needs breaking in. Ashton laughed, and the sound was swallowed by the city lights. They were the strong, and the strong always win. Lorraine Hunt got a job at the Somerville Public Library in the archives. It was perfect. The archives were in the basement, a place of cool, dry air, the smell of old paper, and profound, uninterrupted silence. Her job, for 20 hours a week, paid in cash from a miscellaneous fund, was to catalogue a new donation of 19th century whaling logs. She became a ghost. Her days fell into a new rhythm. Wake up on the floor mattress, walk to the corner bodega for a coffee, black, and a bagel, day-old. Walk to the library, sit in the dark, deciphering the looping, faded cursive of men long dead. Sighted whale, 10 o'clock, lowered boats, stout struck first. She would lose hours, days in the ink. At night, she would walk home, buy a can of soup and a loaf of bread, and eat in her empty apartment. She read Jane Eyre again. She read Persuasion. She read every book she'd ever loved, books Ashton had called a waste of time. The $500 stipend from Spencer Leighton arrived every Monday, in a plain white envelope slipped under her door by a courier she never saw. It felt like spycraft. She lived on less than half of it. The rest she put in a shoebox under her mattress. She was not Lorraine Wilde, the gracious hostess. She was not Lorraine Hunt, the pitted divorcee. She was just Lorraine. The quiet woman from the archives. Her co-worker, a woman in her 60s named Merrill, with bright, purple-streaked hair, invited her for a drink one Friday. You're too pale, honey, Merrill said, squinting at her. You need a beer and some sunshine. Lorraine panicked, made an excuse. My cat is sick. Merrill just nodded. All right, but the offer stands. We all need a port in the storm. Lorraine felt a pang of guilt. Merrill's kindness was a simple, uncomplicated thing, but Spencer's voice was a constant echo in her head. Do not make attachments. Remain invisible. The silence, which had at first been a suffocating prison, was beginning to change. It was becoming hers. In her old life, silence was a failure. It was the empty space after Ashton's cutting remarks. It was the long, tense dinners where the clinking of silverware was the only sound. Here, in the archives, silence was a strength. It was the sound of concentration, of history, of things enduring. She was enduring. With 2 weeks to go until her birthday, the first real test came. She was walking home, her cheap wool coat buttoned up to her chin, when she saw him. It wasn't Ashton. It was his father. Arthur Wilde. A man of booming opinions and casual cruelty, who had always looked at Lorraine as if she were a mild, disappointing investment. He was coming out of a bakery, holding a box of pastries. He hadn't seen her. Lorraine's heart leaped into her throat. She froze. Her first instinct, born of 8 years of training, was to cross the street, to smile, to ask about his wife, to perform the role of the dutiful daughter-in-law. He looked up, scanning the street for his driver. Lorraine did something she had never done. She turned, ducked into the alley she was passing, and pressed her back against the cold, damp brick. She held her breath, her heart hammering. The alley smelled of stale beer and urine. She heard his voice, loud and imperious. "Henry, bring the car around. I'm not standing in this cold." She heard a car door slam, and then the sound of the engine fading. She slid down the wall, her legs weak, and sat on the wet pavement. She had hidden, like a rat. She felt a wave of self-loathing, so profound it made her sick. She had hidden from Arthur Wilde. But then, a new thought, sharp and clear. She had hidden, and he had not seen her. She had won. She had protected the stipulation. She had protected Ilara's gift. She stood up, brushing off her coat. The woman who had been married to Ashton would have crossed the street and debased herself. The woman who had been married to Ashton was a performer. Lorraine Hunt, the ghost of Somerville, was a survivor. A week later, the real temptation came. The stipend didn't arrive on Monday. Lorraine waited. Tuesday, the envelope wasn't there. Wednesday, still nothing. Her shoebox was nearly empty. She had $40 left. She ate the last of her bread and the last can of soup. On Thursday, she was genuinely hungry. She thought, "This is a test. Leighton is testing me." She thought, "Ashton was late on a support payment once. I could call David, my old lawyer. I could still—" No, that was the old thinking. She went to her closet. In the back was a single designer handbag she'd been allowed to keep, a Chanel, a gift from Ashton. She'd kept it, not for the bag, but because she'd hidden her emergency $200 in a zipper pocket. She took out the $200, and then she looked at the bag. It was black, quilted, and suddenly it looked like a shackle. She took the bag, her $40, and the jade pendant. She went to a consignment shop in Cambridge. "It's a classic," the woman behind the counter said, her eyes sharp. "But it's got a scratch on the clasp. I'll give you $500 for it." "I'll take it," Lorraine said, not even hesitating. As the woman was counting out the bills, she noticed the jade pendant. "That's lovely," she said. "Unusual. Is it for sale?" "No," Lorraine said, her hand closing around the cool stone. "It's a gift." She walked out with $540 in her pocket. She felt light. She had just sold the last piece of her old life. She had fed herself. When she got back to her apartment, the white envelope was on the floor. It had been pushed under the door. She opened it. Inside was the $500, and a note in Spencer Leighton's elegant, severe script. "A clerical error. My apologies. The final stretch is always the hardest. Do not falter." Lorraine took the new $500 and put it in the shoebox with the $540. She was no longer just enduring. She was thriving. Her birthday was tomorrow. It was a Tuesday. She set her alarm for her library shift. She had logs to catalogue. Tuesday. Her 35th birthday. Lorraine woke up on her mattress. The sun was streaming through the grimy window. It was the 1st of May. She went to the library. She sat in the basement, and at 10:15 a.m. she finished cataloguing the Amelia, a whaling ship lost off the coast of Nantucket in 1843. She wrote the last entry, closed the book, and stood up. Merrill was at the bottom of the stairs, holding a cupcake with a single unlit candle. "Happy birthday, honey," Merrill said, smiling her purple lipstick smile. "The sick cat excuse was so bad, I figured you were a domestic violence case or a spy. I checked the employee records for your birthday. Go on, make a wish." Lorraine looked at the cupcake. It was lopsided, chocolate, and the most beautiful thing she had ever seen. She felt a sudden, sharp stinging behind her eyes. "Merrill, shh, don't have to say anything." Merrill lit the candle. "Wish." Lorraine closed her eyes. She didn't wish for money, or a house, or revenge. She wished for more of this. More simple, real kindness. She blew out the candle. "Atta girl," Merrill said. "Now, I'm clocking you out for the rest of the day. Go. Go have a life." Lorraine, holding the cupcake, walked out of the library and into the bright May sunshine. She ate the cupcake on the steps. It was delicious. Her burner phone buzzed. It was Spencer Layton. "It's noon," he said, without preamble. "The trust is active. Your access is enabled." Lorraine said, her mouth full of chocolate frosting. "Okay. I have a car waiting for you on the corner of Highland and Central. It will bring you to my office. We have much to discuss. Congratulations, Miss Hunt. You made it." The car was a black Mercedes, so clean it looked wet. The driver, a woman with a severe haircut, opened the door for her. Lorraine, in her pilled wool coat and with chocolate on her face, slid into the plush leather interior. She was back in Spencer Layton's office. The mahogany gleamed. But this time, Spencer was smiling. A small, thin smile, but a smile nonetheless. "Please sit." He didn't gesture to the hard-backed chair she'd sat in before. He gestured to the comfortable leather armchair by the window. On the table was a silver tray with a coffee service and a plate of pastries. "I took the liberty," he said. "Thank you, Mr. Layton. Spencer. I think, after all this, you can call me Spencer." He sat opposite her. "The Elara stipulation is officially satisfied. The full assets of the trust are now under your direction. 212,450,018 cents as of this morning's market open." Lorraine just nodded. The number was so large it was meaningless. "I am no longer your executor, Lorraine. I am, if you will have me, your advisor, your lawyer, your fixer, as the modern parlance goes." "I think I'll need one of those," she said. "First," he said, pushing a thin, black debit card across the table. "This is tied to your primary liquid account. It has a daily limit of $100,000. I trust that will be sufficient for now." Lorraine picked up the card. It felt just like any other card. It was heavy. "Second," he said, handing her a thick vellum envelope. "Your new keys, the penthouse at the Mandarin. It was one of Ilara's pied-à-terre. I think you'll find it more comfortable than Somerville. And third," Spencer's face became serious. He steepled his fingers. "Ilara had one final instruction, a post-stipulation directive." "Oh?" Lorraine's heart, which had been so calm, gave a small lurch. She wanted an announcement, a public one. He slid a piece of paper across the desk. It was a press release, for immediate release. "The Ilara Crane. Trust announces Heiress Boston, M.A. May 1st, Layton and Associates, representing the Ilara Crane Trust, is pleased to announce that the entirety of the 200-man-or-plus estate of philanthropist Ilara Crane has been transferred to its sole, designated heir, Ms. Lorraine Hunt of Boston. Ms. Hunt, the great-niece of Ms. Crane, has completed the terms of the private trust and takes full control of the assets, including a controlling interest in Crane Industries, effective immediately." Lorraine read it and reread it. Her name, her maiden name. "Why?" she whispered. "Why public? Elara was a cynic, Lorraine, Spencer said, not unkindly. She believed money didn't change people, it just revealed them. Her note on the matter was simple. The announcement is a bug light. It will show her exactly who the insects are. She wanted you to be prepared. She's naming Rosalind as a crane, Lorraine said, pointing to the name. Crane Industries. No, Spencer said, a genuine wolfish smile spreading across his face. That's the delicious part. Elara owned Crane Industries. The company Rosalind's father and grandfather ran into the ground. Elara bought it for pennies, decades ago. She's been the silent owner all along. As of today, Ms. Rosalind Crane's new boss is you. Lorraine looked at the paper and then at Spencer. This is not a bug light, Spencer, Lorraine said, a slow, cold, and utterly unfamiliar smile spreading across her own face. This is a tactical nuke. Indeed, Spencer said. I have it set to release to the AP Wire, the Boston Globe, and the Wall Street Journal. On your command. Lorraine thought of Ashton's mocking laugh. She thought of Rosalind's pitying stare. She thought of the pilled wool coat, which she was suddenly, desperately, looking forward to burning. Mr. Layton. Spencer, she said, placing the debit card in her pocket. Hit send. Ashton Wilde was in a board meeting, arguing about quarterly projections, when his phone began to vibrate. He ignored it. His phone was always vibrating. But then it didn't stop. It buzzed, and buzzed, and buzzed. A frantic, insistent swarm of bees buzzing that finally made him snap. For God's sake, he barked, silencing the room. He snatched the phone from the table. His lock screen was a wall of text. 28 new messages, 4,000 missed calls. They were from his partners, his investors, his father. He opened the first text. It was from his father. Is this a joke? He opened the second. From his partner, Mark. Ashton, call me. Now. What the hell is this about your ex-wife? Ashton's blood went cold. He clicked the link Mark had sent. The Boston Globe. He read the headline. Boston's newest billionaire. Unknown heiress Lorraine Hunt inherits 200-meter crane fortune. He read the first line. Lorraine Hunt, 35, formerly of Beacon Street. He read the next line. Controlling interest in Crane Industries. He didn't understand. The words wouldn't connect. Lorraine Hunt. His Lorraine? No, it was a mistake. A typo. It had to be. He stood up, his chair scraping violently. Meeting's over, he mumbled, and stumbled out of the room, fumbling with his phone. He called the first number he could. Rosalind. She picked up on the first ring, but she wasn't purring. She was screaming. What did you do? She shrieked, her voice a raw, ugly thing he'd never heard before. What did I do? What is this? It's a mistake, right? Some other Lorraine Hunt. It's not a mistake, you absolute idiot. Rosalind was sobbing now, a desperate, gasping sound. They just read it, in the all-hands meeting. A press release from Layton and Associates, Elara Crane's estate. It didn't go to the cats, Ash. It went to her, to your pathetic, stupid nothing of an ex-wife. The word crane hit him like a physical blow. Crane? He said, his mind finally, horribly, connecting the dots. Rosalind. Crane, you're related to her. You knew, and you let me. You let me give her everything. Wait, that wasn't right. He'd given her nothing. Ashton, you're not listening. Rosalind was hysterical. She owns the company, Ash. She owns my job. She owns me. Ashton hung up. He was standing in the middle of his office, but the walls were closing in. $200 million, he thought of the divorce. Her silence. Her pathetic silence. Oh God, it wasn't pathetic. It was Strategic. He thought of the 2010 Honda Civic, the guest room furniture, the $20,000. He swayed, physically ill. He had. She played me, he whispered. He, Ashton Wilde, the smartest man in any room, had been played. By Lorraine. He grabbed his briefcase, spilling papers on the floor. He ran to the elevator. He had to find her. He had to fix this. He drove to her old apartment in Somerville, the one David had on file. He hadn't known where it was until now. He buzzed 3C. Nothing. He buzzed every other apartment until someone let him in. He ran up the stairs, his heart pounding. He hammered on the door. "Lorraine! Law! Open the door! We need to talk!" The door opened. It was a large man with a beard, wearing a Slayer t-shirt. "Who the hell are you?" the man grunted. "Where is she?" Ashton demanded. "The woman who lived here, Lorraine." "Lady moved out," the man said, unimpressed. "This morning. About 10, 12 suitcases, a giant Mercedes. Looked like she won the lottery." He started to close the door. "Wait," Ashton said, his voice cracking. He was desperate. "Please." "Did she say where she was going?" The man just laughed. "Yeah. She told me goodbye." Door slammed. Ashton ran back to his car. He was sweating. He called her old number. "The number you have dialed is no longer in service." He called David, her divorce lawyer. "Mr. Wilde," David said, and his voice, once so obsequious, was now cold as ice. "I'm afraid I can no longer field your calls. My client has retained new counsel. Have a wonderful day." Click. He was locked out. Completely. He got back in his car and just sat there, in a run-down Somerville neighborhood, as the world he had built, his perfect, shiny, successful world, imploded. He remembered her face in the courtroom, that small, quiet, nothing face. He hadn't broken her. She had been waiting. And then he remembered his last words to her. "I almost would have respected you more if you'd fought." He leaned his head against the steering wheel. He didn't laugh. He didn't cry. He just sat there, in the sudden, terrifying silence of his own making. And for the first time in his life, Ashton Wilde had absolutely no idea what to do next. The insects were just beginning to swarm. 6 months later, the name Lorraine Hunt was now synonymous with power. She was the silent heiress, the ghost of Boston, a media darling precisely because she refused to speak to the media. She had not, in fact, burned the pilled wool coat. She'd had it framed. It hung in the vast, white marble entryway of her penthouse at the Mandarin, a $10,000 frame around a $30 coat. Spencer called it a perfect fuck you. Lorraine called it a reminder. She had not fired Rosalind Crane. That, Spencer had agreed, was her masterstroke. On her first day, Lorraine had walked into the offices of Crane Industries, her offices, wearing a custom-tailored Armani suit the color of ivory. She had called a single, one-on-one meeting. Rosalind had shown up, pale, trembling, and looking for the first time, weak. Lorraine had sat behind the massive 19th-century mahogany desk, Ilara's desk, and pushed a single folder across its polished surface. "That," Lorraine had said, her voice quiet, "is your new project. You are being transferred, effective immediately. Congratulations on your promotion to head of Midwestern Logistics. You'll be based in our Sioux Falls, South Dakota, distribution center." Rosalind had stared, uncomprehending. "Sioux Falls?" "It's cold," Lorraine said, "but I'm told you're a strong woman. You'll survive. You're a yacht, after all. You can handle a little ice." Rosalind, recognizing her own words, had turned the color of ash. "You can't." "I can," Lorraine interrupted, her voice still a whisper, but it filled the room. I am. You're dismissed. Rosalind, the woman who had clawed her way to the 52nd floor, had fled to the icy plains of South Dakota. As for Ashton, he had unraveled. Without Rosalind's strategy, and with the public humiliation of being the man who'd fumbled a $200 million wife, his firm had hemorrhaged clients. He'd tried to sue Lorraine. He'd filed a motion to reopen the divorce, claiming fraudulent concealment of assets. The judge, the same Judge O'Malley, had laughed him out of court, literally. "Mr. Wilde," she'd said, "you set the terms. Your wife agreed to them. The fact that you were, to put it mildly, a moron, is not grounds for appeal. Get out of my courtroom." He had lost his firm, his partners. His father had stopped taking his calls. He was, Lorraine heard from Spencer, living in a small, rented condo and driving a 5-year-old BMW. Lorraine, meanwhile, had found her voice, not in boardrooms, but in art. She had used the first $10 million of her fortune to open the Alara Crane Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to funding and supporting emerging female artists. Her art history degree, the one Ashton had mocked, was now her greatest asset. She was at a gallery opening in Soho, a small, independent place she was funding, when she saw him. He wasn't Ashton. He was Spencer Layton. "Lorraine," he said, smiling. He looked different. Out of his pinstripe armor, he was wearing a simple, dark sweater. He looked human. "Spencer, I'm surprised to see you south of Boston. I was in town for a meeting," he said, gesturing to the art. "This is extraordinary. What you're doing. Alara would be, I don't know the word, proud," Lorraine suggested. "No," Spencer said, thinking. "She'd be smug. She would have adored being this right." They laughed, a simple, easy sound. "This is the redemption, isn't it?" he said, looking at a vast, chaotic, beautiful canvas. "I'm not sure," Lorraine said. "I think I'm just getting started." He was about to say something else when a disturbance at the door caught their attention. A man was arguing with the security guard, a man who looked familiar, but wrong. He was haggard. His suit, once tailored, hung on him. His hair was a mess. It was Ashton. "I just want to talk to her," he was saying, his voice a desperate, cracking whine. Lorraine, please." Security was about to physically remove him. "It's all right," Lorraine said, her voice cutting through the room. The gallery went silent. "Let him in." The guards stepped aside. Ashton stumbled in, his eyes wild. He saw her, standing there, luminous and calm in a simple black dress, the jade pendant at her throat. "Law," he breathed, walking toward her. He stopped a few feet away. "Lorraine, you look amazing." "Ashton," she said. Her voice was flat. Not cold, not angry, just done. "Law, please," he said, and he was actually wringing his hands. I'm so sorry. I was an idiot, a fool. I didn't know." "That's the point," she said. "You didn't know. You didn't care to know. You didn't care about me, Ash. You just cared about what I represented. And when I stopped representing what you wanted, you threw me away." "No," he said, taking a step closer. Spencer took a protective step forward, but Lorraine put a hand on his arm. "It's okay, Spencer." She looked back at Ashton. "I can fix this, Law," Ashton pleaded. He was trying to find his old charm, but it was gone. He just looked pathetic. "We can fix this. I've lost everything, but I still love you." Lorraine almost laughed. It was the same word, pathetic, that he had used for her. The irony was so thick it was choking. She looked at this man, this shell of a man, who had mocked her, betrayed her, and dismissed her. She searched for the anger, the pain, the years of humiliation. She found nothing. He was just a man. A small, sad man. "No, Ash," she said, and her voice was finally her own. It was clear, and it was strong, and it was free. "You don't love me. You love the idea of me. The idea of my money. The woman you loved, the one you destroyed, is gone. You're not looking at her." "But what can I do?" he whispered, his eyes filling with tears. "Tell me what to do. I'll do anything." Lorraine Hunt looked at her ex-husband, the man who had laughed at her silence in a cold, grey courtroom. She gave him the first and last real smile she'd ever shown him. "I have nothing to say to you, Ashton." She turned, took Spencer's arm and walked away, leaving him standing alone in the middle of a room full of art he would never understand, bought with a fortune he would never touch. Lorraine's story of silence and strength is over, but the conversation is just beginning. What did you think of her revenge? Was it colder than a Boston winter, or just plain perfect? We all know someone who has been underestimated, or maybe you've been the Lorraine in your own story. Share your thoughts in the comments below. What was your favorite twist? And if you love stories of betrayal, redemption, and epic comebacks, make sure to like this video, share it with a friend, and subscribe for more deep dive dramas. Thank you for watching.